Welcome everybody back to another episode of Woven Wings Live, where we bring you wisdom and tools for vibrant living. I'm Gabe Crane, and I'm joined by my co-host Rahul Didwania. And if you enjoy listening to us, please share our podcast with a friend or leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also join our newsletter, which is linked in the show description, to follow along on the journey. If you're listening to us as a podcast, you can also find us on YouTube. You can find highlight episodes, reels of our different podcasts, and follow us along there too. Our episode today is Katsugen, the gentle art of well-being, and our guest is Richard Omura, who's one of the foremost Western experts in this form, Katsugen. And I am excited about this episode today, Rahul. It's an opportunity, as we've done with a number of other episodes on our show, to dive into a particular modality that maybe a lot of our listeners and folks may not be as familiar with. But I've personally, just in a light sense, but I've gotten a chance to explore the Katsugen experience or the movements with Richard a little bit, and found them to be pretty cathartic and pleasant and revealing when I've done them myself. And so I'm excited to just kind of explore that. It's more of intuitive or spontaneously based movement today. And so I think that's one of the themes that we're looking at here around what does it mean to really be in the intuitive wisdom of our body, or be able to drop into a flow state. We're able to move more naturally with who we are as a being and experience the health benefits of that, the creativity that comes from that, and also really kind of explore a little bit, why are we not in that state more often? What exactly is getting in the way of us just getting to let go and actually experience life in that sort of pleasant way? And so, yeah, before I get any further into that, Rahul, I'm just kind of curious, what's your own relationship to this kind of spontaneous, intuitive wisdom, and what are you looking forward to about our show today with Richard?
Thank you, Gabe. Yeah, I was similar to you, very, very much looking forward to diving into a new practice. I wasn't even familiar with Katsugen until we spoke with Richard, a couple of weeks ago. And so excited to dive in more deeply. And for me, this topic is also very interesting. I think the word gentle is very appealing to me because it conveys just like a softness and a tenderness that I think is often missing in a lot of day-to-day life. I mean, even when we talk about well-being, right? Wellness, well-being, even flow states are talked about a lot, right? But they're talked about in the context of productivity. They're talked about in the context of something to effort towards and to grasp towards. And I can relate to those ways of looking at well-being quite strongly as well. I think I tend to effort and grasp and to seek sort of a deliberate, active way to get somewhere. I think a lot of that is conditioned. It's just the way we talk about things often in certain parts of Western society, I think, that we roll through and move through. And so I'm eager to look at a different way, and as part of that same way or same draw, and I think I've mentioned to you, I started taking improv classes a few months ago, and it was something I've been interested in for a really long time. But what really drove that, right? What got me to actually do it was this recognition that I wanted to be flowing from a natural place more, and I wanted to be letting go of a lot of the judgments or the conscious things that might hold us back from accessing that state. And I wanted to have fun with it, right? To just connect with the playfulness or the silliness or the whatever, that comes from that space, and to be okay with it being good or bad or funny or not, or whatever it might be, because I think that's another important part of this whole equation, right? It's not just coming from that place, but being okay with what comes out of that place, and not judging it or putting it down per se. And I think the connection from that way of being or that orientation to well-being, I think is the one that I'm really, really excited to explore with Richard today.
Yeah, you touched on so much there that I will withhold my desire to just launch into all that myself, and I'll bring Richard on. But one thing I will say, that what you said I think really highlights is just that requirement, that need we have to peel back the layers. Life is so hard, and we get conditioned through all the stuff we have to do as we go through life to be hard and sharp and pointed. And, your emphasis on the gentleness, it brings me back to, I think that's a statement from Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching of, the soft center of the universe. I don't know the exact quote, but it's the soft middle that moves the hard, that somehow has more power and more meaning. And I personally really resonate with that too. So on that note, before we go any further, let me bring our guest on, Richard Omura, who was born in Tokyo, Japan, and was also a U.S. Army dependent, so an Army brat in his own words. And as a result, he's the result of two cultures, American and Japanese. And he says, taking the best of both of those and a little bit of the worst. And he spent most of his life in Hawaii. That's where I've met Richard. We have family connection. We're not family, but some of my family's grown up with Richard, and that's a real gift to get connected to him in that way. Richard spent his life between the Hawaiian Islands and Los Angeles. He's had a career in the film and music industry. And, it's in Richard's bio, which you can see in the show description, but Richard is an eclectic and accomplished individual who's done a lot of really interesting things in his life. He's written several books, 7 of them to be exact, 6 screenplays. He's been a radio DJ and copywriter. He's played in a blues band throughout Southern California. And as he speaks to when we were prepping this show, I think he attributes a lot of his creativity to this practice of Katsugen and being able to tap into a sense of inspiration and creativity. And ultimately, in Richard's own words, his main focus is nurturing spiritual consciousness and awareness in the world. And so you can find out more about him at richardomura.com. That's O-M-U-R-A, richardomura.com. And before I go any further, Richard, I just want to welcome you to come on and join us. And it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being with us. You can flip your camera on and hop on with us. I guess just as like a first thing, aside from just saying thanks for being with us, I just wanted to ask if you could introduce us and our listeners to this practice of Katsugen in a very, very broad top line sort of way. What is Katsugen? What is this practice that I think a lot of folks have not heard of? And what's the philosophy behind it? Where does it come from? What's its history?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here. I really enjoy letting the world know about this practice of Katsugen. And I found this practice through my illness. I had a brain tumor when I was 8 or so. And my mom, I had surgery for that, but had some, the surgery messed up my pituitary gland and so on and so forth. And my mom took me to a Japanese healer to supplement the Western practice, the Western medical practice, which I was getting treatments. And then she decided that I needed some, she kind of believed in the metaphysical and the mysterious aspects of life also. So she wanted to make sure that I was okay on both sides of both the Eastern and the Western views of medicine. And so she took me to this healer named Dr. Noguchi, and he made this practice because he was a healer that had this innate ability to heal people, but he also was trained in various modalities, and I don't know if you can say discover or he formulated this practice in order to supplement the practice that he had, because he would treat people one-on-one, but they're just, he didn't have enough time to treat everybody. So he said, well, you guys do this practice first, and it's a way of self-healing. And so that's what he did, and I learned it from him. And from his dojo. He had this big Japanese mansion in Tokyo where he did his practice. And I learned this when I was a kid, and I just learned it by rote. I didn't really know why it worked or if it even worked. I just did it because my mom said I should do it. And so I did it, and I kind of forgot about it. I quite didn't get it, because I was a kid. But it wasn't until I think it was in my early 20s that I decided, hey, I have this practice. I haven't really done anything with it. So I decided to work on it, because that was, around the age when I was going into all kinds of discoveries of myself. I was reading various philosophical books and spiritual books, and I was experimenting with hallucinogens, and I was just basically exploring life in all its aspects. And Katsugen was, something that just came up in my mind. I said, you know what? No one's heard of this. I got to figure out if this really works or what it's all about. And so I started to do it on my own. And it was amazing. I would do it to music in the beginning, and it would, every time I would feel like kind of lethargic or dull or things were out of sorts, I would do this, the Katsugen, and it would just revive me. It would just make me like feel so joyful about life that I started to work on it more and more and more. And I couldn't find anybody else to do it with, because I was in LA, and Dr. Noguchi had passed away a while ago, and his son was carrying on the practice, but I was not connected to them at all. I had no communication with them, so I had to work on my own. And so I never really believed in like, I got to force myself to do this, to do anything, actually. I always wanted to be free form and do things when I really, really felt like it in my inner core. And that's what I did with Katsugen. Sometimes I would go for months without doing it. And sometimes I would, do it for every day for a few days, or just once a week or something. But eventually it all caught up to me. And I said, this is something, I have something here. I have to at least try to do it every day. Kind of like writing. Rahul, I read your musings about your writing, and I think it was your music or your writing, about how people have writer's block. And I realized that, and I read this from somewhere else too, that the thing is to just sit there in the beginning, even if you don't write anything, just write a few words, or just sit there in front of the computer. And if you write something, that's fine. And sometimes it'll take me to like hours of writing. And sometimes I just go, you know what, nothing's happening. I'm out of here. But the important thing was to just sit there and give me an opportunity to write if I had the inspiration. And so it was with Katsugen. I did it because I really wanted to do it, not because I said I got to do it. But then in the beginning, I said I got to at least try, start the movement, and then if I don't want to do it, then I won't do it, and I'll quit. But every time I would start the movement, I would continue, because it became a pleasure. It was a joy. It wasn't a chore. It wasn't like going out and doing 10 push-ups or running a mile or whatever. It wasn't that kind of a thing. It was more like based on my own sense of joy and love of life. And I realized that was actually what the philosophy of Katsugen is that we all have this innate desire to be healthy and to be happy. And that a lot of times what we're doing is we're blocking this natural movement, this natural way of being, with these mental constructs of what, our parents told us, what our schools tell us, what TV and film and everything, our society tells us, that you have to compete and you got to do this. And if you don't do this in this way, you're going to fail and you're going to have a miserable life. All kinds of, thoughts like that flashed through my head. And I realized that those were just thoughts. And that when I did Katsugen, what I was doing was I was bringing out this joy that kind of superseded all these negative mental conditioning that I had when I was a kid, and which I think almost everybody does. Should I continue?
Yeah, no, I mean, Richard, this is all really interesting, just tracking your journey from, your early relationship to this practice to what it became. And it sounds like you were introduced to Katsugen very, very early. We talked in some previous episodes about this idea of sometimes we learn certain things in our childhood and then they come back around, right, to our lives at a later time when we're ready for it. And I heard something in there about a readiness, I think, that emerged for you as you went in and out of the practice, but at some point you connected with it more deeply. And I think that's very relatable for anyone that's trying to build a practice of any kind. And what I'd be curious to keep building on with you is this idea of the practice bringing out your innate joy and your love for life. How does it work? What exactly are you doing that's bringing that out? Or what is it that's taking place within ourselves or in our bodies to encourage that connection with innate joy?
I think, based on my experiences, that many of the things that stress us out and create problems in our lives is because of our obsession with our own ego. And that if we kind of lose our ego, we don't have as much stress. Because what causes stress, our mental stress, is because we're always thinking, how's it going to benefit me, or how's it going to hurt me? And it's all about me and me and me, and that's what causes stress. If you forget about that, really there isn't all that stress that comes with it. But the thing is, the difficult part is that we still have to live in this materialistic society. We still have to deal with a lot of these things. And if it was a perfect world, I can just tap into that joy and that universal feeling I have when I do Katsugen. But the fact is, there are still things in life that, worries us, stresses us out, hurts us. It's not an easy life. And we're always taught to fight against it. We got to fight these things. We got to battle against it. We have to have a certain amount of material stuff. We have to, raise our status level in order to be accepted and validated and all this. But a lot of that is just based on our values. And when we have the Katsugen movement, it's like you get down to what really is important. The basic values of like health and feeling good. Because once I start feeling this feeling of just this innate joy, this innate feeling of oneness. And it doesn't happen all the time. It's not like I do this Katsugen and I'm just like good for the whole day. A lot of times, immediately afterwards, things will hit me in the face and I have to go, oh, wait a minute, things will still affect me. But with Katsugen, I can keep an even balance. It doesn't knock me over. And I can still maintain a sense of this joy, even if I'm surrounded by this chaos, this pain and suffering and whatever that besieges all of us, at a certain time. And I think that's what it is that letting go of all this negative stuff that kills us and destroys us and hurts us. Because when you think of all the things in the world, in our lives that affect us, it gives us the bad health, it's based on our own decisions. We create most of those things, like traffic accidents. We create that. War. We create that. Crime. It's not like a tornado or so-called acts of God. It's basically most of the things that we suffer from are caused by ourselves. So if we can, if we're doing that, then all we have to do, it's up to us basically. And so why are we even doing that? I question myself. Why are we even hurting ourselves? Well, basically it's because of our ego and our conditioning. And so I have to figure out, okay, what part is our behavior based on our conditioning, like things that we learn by rote, and how much of it is really based on how we really feel inside, what we truly want in the depths of our souls. But the thing is, okay, most people they're not even aware of the depths in their souls. They're not even aware of their souls. What is a soul? Everyone has their own meaning, but when we come to Katsugen, what it comes down to is that it's how you manifest that joy. You achieve this sense of joy, this oneness with the universe through Katsugen or other methods. But once we're there, how do we convert that into our behavior? What's that connection? And that's where Katsugen is basically becoming aware of that inner reality that you have and realizing how it affects you, and taking out all the negative stuff and saying, oh, this is true, this isn't. This is all based on something that I learned when I was at school, when I had a bad teacher, or when my brother picked on me or something. You have those things that are a result of that, but those are all conditioned behavior, and so you kind of put that aside and kind of sink in, or be, or embrace this divinity within you. And then but then I realized that a lot of times I can embrace this divinity and I can feel it, but a lot of times I'm not applying it to my life. I had, at that, when I was younger, I had all these aspirations. I wanted to create, I wanted to do this and that, but I go, how come I'm not able to do this, right? How come I just couldn't pull the trigger on being creative and like writing a song or even attempting to sing? A lot of people I know are just so terrified of singing and of dancing and things like that. And I talk to them, they're good friends of mine, and it's like, you can't get beyond this. This is like, oh, no, I could never do that. No, it's like, I go, well, why not? I mean, actually, I quit asking that question because I already know the answer. They're just conditioned not to, and they haven't been able to override this conditioning, this pre-programming. They haven't been able to self-program themselves. It's kind of like, in Star Trek, where you have like Data, the android, he's being able to self-program himself. It's a science fiction TV series, but it reflects reality, because it's the authors, the writers of those stories, it's based on reality. And the fact is, we're all like androids, and a lot of us are like androids, and we're not able to reprogram ourselves because we're so
I want to hop in. I want to hop in right there, Richard, because as I'm listening to you, what I'm noticing is that we're recording this. We see our pictures, right, of ourselves. I don't know if you can see the picture of yourself, Richard, but
sure.
I know that we're recording this video and it's going to become public, and we publish these audios, and then we also publish the episode on YouTube. And as you're speaking, I'm watching myself sit there and thinking about my own ego, and thinking about the social construct too, where I have all these ideas of needing to sit still or needing to sit straight and look at the camera. And I think this is probably why, after Zoom is like this amazing technology that facilitated remote work, but it's also people get exhausted being in these meetings because you're kind of constantly performing. You're constantly having to, at least the idea, as I'm imagining in my head, which I think is pretty common, is that you're kind of constricting yourself into a band of socially acceptable or rewarded behavior. And some of that, I think, is probably natural or appropriate. When I think about my 4-year-old son, like, there are certain behaviors that I want to encourage with him and certain ones that I less so. But when I think about my understanding of this practice of Katsugen, is we're trying to dismantle some of that. And I think that's what you were speaking to when you're talking about the ego. We're trying to break down some of these constrictions that lead us to kind of stopping up our energy, blocking us, putting us into these unnatural ways of being. And later on in the episode, I think we're going to have an opportunity to actually really, not in depth, but we're going to go into the practice a bit more and understand how it works and even try it out a little bit. But can you, in this moment, just speak to that constriction that I think you spoke to it to some degree already, but how is that harmful? What is it doing on the physiological level to us? And how do we get out of that? Why is it important that we get out of that into a more natural way of being?
Well, that's a very good question. And the thing is that there are, two sides to any coin, and there are a lot of things that we learn by rote that is very important. We have to keep those things. And that's the difficulty, is trying to separate the wheat from the chaff. I think that's the phrase of knowing what to keep and what to throw away. And that's something that you can only learn through your own experience. And it's very interesting that I noticed when you were sitting there that, you were twitching a little bit. And I get like that too in conferences and things like that. And that's what's good about Katsugen, is that actually when you start doing that on a regular basis, you don't have that as much. You feel like all that energy has been dissipated through doing Katsugen, so you don't get that. But at the same time, what's wrong with acting a little bit twitchy and going like this? And like, why do we always have to stick this, like you two are sitting right now? Why do we have to sit like that? Why is that acceptable? And why can't Rahul just, go, and then, yeah, exactly. Or do whatever you feel like going, just, you want
that was exactly a thought. That was exactly a thought going through my mind, because I was like, well, why should I just sit here and stare straight ahead? Like, actually what I feel intuitively like I want to do is I want to ponder, I guess, I want to look off in this direction. And it's not that there's anything over there. It's just that that's what's feeling natural for actually connecting authentically with our conversation, and actually being more alive and more present in a real way to our actual interaction. And I'm in this kind of meta trip, and I'm watching you, Rahul. I'm like, okay, you're stretching. Okay, we're getting a little more comfortable. But that's what I want. That's the purpose of our show, right? I mean, if you're listening to this, it's I hope you're yawning and doing whatever, oh, I have to stay in my lane. If you're driving and listening to this, be careful. Or if you're running on a treadmill, be careful. But how we gotta give ourselves that permission to ease up within healthy constraints, I guess, or understanding what to keep, what not to keep, how to keep putting our shoes on in the morning.
Yeah, and you're not going to always please everybody too, It's always there's always someone that's going to have a problem with what you do, and then, but you can't let them stop you. And a lot of times, our preconception, if we act in a certain way, it's going to be a negative thing, that people are going to think we're something, that we're weird or something. A lot of times it's the other way around. People actually appreciate you when you're more animated, and
right.
Of course.
Well, because it's permission, right? It's that's part of this ego trip. I feel like is very socially conditioned. It's about the implicit social expectations we have of each other. Oh, I'm an interviewer, so I'm going to sit still, and therefore, maybe Rahul on some unconscious level picks up on that, or we reinforce it to each other, and then you end up having this stiff interview. But as soon as someone gives you the permission to be yourself by modeling that, by demonstrating that themselves, then that's very liberating, because we reflect all these things to each other. Not always, there's also all those other voices or people, the forces that will be against that. But I think it's very true that, it's liberating when we encounter. For me, it's liberating hearing you share about what this practice is and how it's been helpful to you, because it gives me permission to live my life a little bit more that way.
Yeah, and it's knowing the place and the occasion too, because, we can be free and very casual. Then all of a sudden, let's say this is an interview and I'm President Biden or somebody famous like that. And all of a sudden, you got to feel you're back to being straight-laced, and you don't feel as free anymore just because of the fact that you think, you got to act in a certain way if you're in front of important people. But that's not also true either. That's a mental construct too, because you can act, President Biden, he's just another guy, basically. That's why, I never get, what do you call that? I never put anybody on a pedestal. I've been an actor. I've done some extra acting and stuff and been in front of famous people, but I don't care who they are. If they're human, they're human. Of course, I have to maintain some protocol if I don't want to get kicked out.
So, Richard, as you were sharing everything that you were just saying, I couldn't help but notice a little bit of doubt within myself. I think when you were saying, hey, I just treat any person as a person, whether it's Joe Biden or whoever it might be. And, in terms of just showing up authentically, it's hey, it's the same thing, regardless of who's in front of you. And I think in principle, I can understand that commitment to like being authentic and being ourselves and allowing that expression to come out unabated. But then at the same time, I'm like, it's just like, I can't imagine moving through life that way. I think what you said earlier about, hey, there can be a judgment call, around which settings to be in a certain way versus another, or to be maybe channeling that same sense of joy, regardless of setting. Like that I can grasp and that I can understand and even picture. But I think this idea of just being completely free or loose or whatever, regardless of what the circumstances are, I notice some resistance around that. And I'm curious if you can comment on whether I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly. And then if so, how do you reconcile what might be some of the real world considerations that do matter, with this idea of what I'm understanding the practice to be, which is tuning into our own authentic selves and allowing that to express itself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that concern, and I have that, and it's something that you're not going to get over, because the fact is that, like I mentioned before, we live in this world and we have to deal with the facts, and if we are conditioned, we can't just break that conditioning just like that. It's not that easy, and I think the whole adventure is the process of kind of trying to figure out what works for you. There's no set rule like you have to completely get rid of all your conditioning. You might want to keep some, but it's up to you and how much you want to be free to what crowd, to which person. Because, we can't help but respond differently to each person because each person has their own way. We don't want to be two-faced. We want to be authentic, but we want to also take into consideration the other person's feelings and their circumstances. If they don't feel comfortable with you being totally free, and a lot of people aren't, you just have to kind of say, well, I want to be more free, but I can't because this would offend that person. So basically, you just kind of go according to how you feel. Like, in other words, that part of that feeling that has compassion and wants to accommodate that person is also part of that divine joy that's within you, right?
It makes me think, if I can jump in here, Richard, it just makes me think too about, you might not want to offend people, but we're walking around so much of the time with an external orientation in life, and then we ascribe, President Biden is our example here. He's on this pedestal because he has all this power and attention focused around him. He's this giant public figure. He's the president, right? And of course, that's very understandable. I'm not really trying to critique that or whatever, but I do think that we tend to be so focused on those kind of external status symbols that it disconnects us from our own inherent experience, our own self-worth, our own sense of personal value. But then also, what I understand from this practice is kind of putting us more deeply in touch with our own internal reality, our own internal experience, and placing some intrinsic value in that. I think I'm here doing this interview with you guys in the same room where I was doing some of this Katsugen practice from Richard before. And what I found in my own process of kind of peeling back the onion is there's just all these different layers of judgment, of trying to become X, Y, or Z, of being happy with one state of being and not happy with another in an external sense, a sense of success and failure in life. And through kind of letting go of some of those things temporarily, at least, there is a feeling of, you talked about joy and love earlier, Richard, and the sense of pleasure. There's something pleasurable that comes from making peace with myself as I am, where I am, and being able to be nourished by that. And I think, I don't know, Richard, if you could kind of build on that, but am I on track there? That's some of the benefit that I see, not just from Katsugen, but we're talking about spiritual practice in general, as it kind of distances us from the typical, arguably superficial things that we spend most of our time pursuing. and that seem to be most important. And it seems ridiculous from the outside when you're bound up in all that. But when you actually tap into it inside, you start to realize, some of these eternal spiritual truths. All that glitters is not gold. Like what actually matters in life is our own personal relationship with ourselves, with nature, with God, with a sense of something beyond us. And I think that's what we're talking about here, of being tapped into. Richard, what do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing, that once I started to practice Katsugen regularly, and over the years, I began to have a better idea of my own inner reality and how that affects my outer reality. And one of the things that I discovered was this place within me that was covered up with all this negative energies and just extraneous energies. And that once I got rid of that through movement, I find myself in this place of peace, and I built my meditation practice on that. And I do something called worshipful meditation. It's kind of like mindful meditation, but the worship part is to meditate on the source, which some people call God, the creator or whatever. I usually don't like to use the word God because people always think of their God, the Christian God or the Buddhist God or which they don't have, and the Muslim God or whatever. But I have to find out, what is it in my own experience? Can I find God within myself? Can I find a source within myself? And to do that, Katsugen really helped because it got rid of all these extraneous energies. I was into Nichiren Buddhism for a while too, and that their chanting of the mantra is for that same purpose, is to get rid of that extraneous surface thoughts. And with Katsugen, it's not just the surface thoughts, the surface feelings. You can actually convert that into something that's material, because movement is material, and you're getting rid of it. And that source, once you kind of tap into that source is, if it is a true source, if it truly is God, if it truly is the creator, or, it should override everything else, because basically God or the creator is an absolute entity, all powerful, all seeing. That's the proof of the pudding that this thing works, is that if you can convert this stuff into actually manipulating reality, to put it in a certain phrase, to actually, when I say manipulate, I mean manipulate your health so that you're healthful. You're manipulating the environment to provide more love, more shelter, more food, whatever, that makes the world a better place. That's what we want to do, is we want to change the negative aspects of life using or tapping into the source where all this stuff comes from. And the proof is that it actually happens. If it doesn't happen, doesn't matter what kind of theories you have, doesn't matter all the books that write about this stuff. It's like like electricity. You can have all these theories about how electricity works and connect the wires and everything, but the final result is what proves it, right? You click on the switch and it lights up. The light bulb lights up, and that's when And to me, that's what the ultimate proof of the fact that Katsugen works is. It's up to the individual. It's not going to work for everybody because a lot of people aren't going to do it right. But if it's done right, it should turn on that light bulb. There should be a tangible result in your life.
So on that note, Richard, I'm curious if maybe we could dive into actually the practice itself a little bit. And we talked about it. I'm curious if you could just, again, this will just be kind of just a little taste of something, but I'm curious if you could lead us through some movements and some opening to ourselves that kind of allows us and our listeners to connect with this in a more tangible, personal way.
Sure. Basically, it's very simple. It's so simple that a lot of people find it hard. And the basic movement is there. I guess there can be other ways to do this, but the way that I've been taught is to do something a little bit unnatural to the body. and that makes the body, okay? So basically, Katsugen is activating our autonomic nervous systems by doing something a little bit unnatural. See, the autonomic nervous system tends to correct things, to makes things stable in our body. So when we do something a little bit unnatural, it will respond to that. And that's what we're trying to do. So basically, the things that, the induction movement starts with doing these things that are a little bit unnatural. First of all, you clench your thumb inside your fist. Because normally the thumbs are outward, like this is how you make a fist. That's natural. Nobody makes a fist like this. So that's what you do, okay? And then you clench your shoulder blades, the shoulder blades, you make them touch, try to make them touch, and breathe out at the same time instead of breathing in. And then you let go all of a sudden. Okay, and you do that 3 times. And you put your chi back. When you clench your fist, your chi is going backwards. So you do that. Breathe out. And then basically, after that, you just sit there. Oh, there is one thing that you can do this before or after this induction movement. Is basically you should twirl your your spine. This is just a warm up, basically, because your body might start to move in different ways. You want to warm up your body. So basically, you just kind of look at the base of your spine and bring it back. A lot of chiropractors do this movement, or they recommend it, rather. But that's basically just a warm up. It's not absolutely necessary. But then you do those movements, and then you sit there. And basically, this is the hard part, because what you're doing is you're becoming aware of your inner reality, of all these inner forces and things that want to move your body, but you're not letting it. It might be something simple that's like you got a little itch on your leg, you want to scratch it. It might be just, you just might want to shake your head. I mean, it's all these things that it's not just your inner reality, of course, it's the inner reality that's acting upon your body. The things all the energies in the environment, inner and outer environment, that's exerting its force on your body, but you're keeping it still. You're trying to keep your body in this locked in position because society conditioned you to do that. So that's the difficult part, is to let go of that conditioning and to start feeling these movements. Like even when I'm talking, like I have this, I might want to, like people, when they talk, they gesture. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people just, they're so locked in. But that's the thing is to just sit there and let your body move. And a lot of this is better done privately, because the things that keep people from doing this is because other people are watching and you've been conditioned that this is not natural, that it's stupid, that it looks weird, whatever, but you have to get rid of all those thoughts, because those are just thoughts that are like programming, and they were good to a certain extent when you were kids, because a kid has to maintain self-control and can't be acting in ways that are offensive. So I recommend doing this by yourself, initially at least, and to just, if you want to use music, you can use music. But the only thing about using music is that you don't want to dance, because dancing is they're thinking about what other people might say. You want to look cool, you want to dance good. So but music is great though, because I use music a lot of times, and it makes me move in ways that I couldn't move without the music. But you don't have to like stick to the beat when you're using music. You can just go completely off the beat, and you don't even have to move. If some people just sit there and they're so tired and stressed out, and they never had a chance to relax. and that might be something that you might want to do. And some people, they just sit there and like move in a very simple way, just one movement, and it's something that intellectually you don't know why, but it's a lot of times it's because of certain physiological things in your body. I mean, there are so many things that medical science hasn't discovered yet, and so a lot of this is going by what your body, your innate bodily intelligence knows what is right for you. Just like dogs, they know how to eat. They eat like grass, right? They don't know. They don't have any medical science. They don't have any data to prove that eating grass is good for their stomach. But the dogs know instinctively, intuitively, that eating grass will ease their stomach or whatever condition they have. And so basically your body has this innate intelligence, and the thing is to let your innate bodily intelligence dictate what you're going to do and keep the mind away from it. And the mind is kind of like, like taking your dog for a walk, and you take the leash off and let him romp around the park or something. But the mind is on the side watching, but not interfering, because you want to watch to make sure that the dog doesn't do something dangerous or bother some people. So basically the mind stays to the side and just observes the animal, but lets the animal free to do what it wants. Now, of course, the problem there, there is is that there are certain mental conditionings that you might feel you don't feel comfortable breaking, even though it might not hurt anybody, it might not be morally wrong, but you just and that's up to you. Those things are things that you decide on your own. But basically, you just let your body go, and then what happens if you're starting to do it right in the beginning is just basic movement. But just like a few minutes ago, I saw Gabe yawn, and that's one of the autonomic nervous system functions, like yawning, sneezing, belching, even farting, and all of those things. So that's why you want to be in the privacy of your own home or your room or whatever, because those things are things that if you're in a group situation might offend other people. But you let it go, and then you start to have these. I have these huge yawns where you just feel like your whole body is taking in the universe, and you're just letting, and it's just really huge. And it just continues, and they just let it go. But see, this is where a lot of ladies, a lot of people can't get over. I mean, they can get to that point, but what they don't do is they don't realize that if they have deep-seated conditioning that is very negative, and they have to let it out, it's not going to come out in gentle movements. You're not going to be going, oh, and I see ladies going, just making these great gentle movements, and there's peaceful, but you have to remember that what goes in must come out. And if something negative comes out, sometimes it's going to be weird. It's going to be, very dynamic. You're going to have these motions. Like if you were raised as a kid and you were beaten up on, okay, by your parents or your friends, and you have this anger, how are you going to let that out? You can't let it out by just doing these gentle movements. It's going to have to come out. Like you might even, like a primal scream thing. You might even want to, scream out loud. But that's not enough. But with these movements, you can shake it out. You can do all of these movements. That's why it's not. It's still under control because your mind is still there, so that your body doesn't go and hurt itself by bumping into things. In fact, when I do Katsugen in a room that's kind of limited, there's not a whole lot of room, I use the furniture and the chairs as a support and the walls. It's not something that's obstructing me. I can use the environment as part of the Katsugen movement. So
right. I think that just to interrupt for a second, Richard, I think safety, of course, is something to really think about if you're doing this at home, and just to be careful. Or we talked about gentleness at the start of the episode, right? So being kind to yourself, your environment, if you're going to experiment with this. But not to interrupt you, Richard, but what I'm noticing happening as I'm doing the movement is you mentioned like the yawning, the burping. I'm noticing like muscles cracking and like just intuitive things that I feel like doing. And then what I feel on the other side is this, it's very, very nice feeling physically inside. Like I feel this, I just feel, I don't know what to call that. Peace, pleasure. There's something pleasurable in it. It's peaceful. And I just, like laughter too. It's making me think about our interview, Rahul, with Simeon, with Shimon. Like I just, and it's funny. I'm curious what you're experiencing, Rahul, because like we've had tech challenges today, and like different things. You might notice that if you're listening to this episode, it's like a little glitchy in different ways, and like I don't know. As we're doing the practice, at least personally, like I don't care. I'm happy. I'm just happy that we're spending this time doing this. And there's like a feeling of freedom and kind of being in the unknown, but in a happy way. Like sometimes I think our episodes, because we've gotten used to doing them, Rahul, have kind of become like buttoned up. We have like our routine that we go through and each episode's different, but it's like professional, and like, I think if I go back to the origins of our intention for this podcast, it's not just that it's professional, it's that it's authentic and transformational. And in some way, what you're leading us through, Richard, is just like tapping me into a deeper well of that at the moment. So I'm kind of curious what you're experiencing, Rahul.
No, I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned the tech issues. Most of them have been on my side today, or all of them really. And it's really taken me out of it and kind of been frustrating. And, I've felt a little bit of like maybe uncalled for, but like shame around it and like frustration around it. And I want to thank you, Richard, for leading us through that simple warm up and then just guiding us through this idea of just allowing the body to express itself, right? And I think what I'm viewing, or how I'm conceptualizing this practice, is that it's a different leg of a mindfulness journey, right? Where we're just tuning in to what's actually happening for us. And sort of, I noted 3 things that came out of it, in those few minutes. One was that there was like a level 1 set of movements that my body wanted to do that were really just oriented around comfort. So I felt like some tightness in my shoulder. I felt like, my back, I want to straighten up, I want to crack my neck, and there's a lot just happening there and allowing the body to just do those things. The second was around that feeling of joy, similar to maybe what you were talking about, Gabe. And funnily for me, the way that was expressing itself before you said anything, Richard, was wanting to dance, and wanting to just go off and be in some sort of playful dance-like motion. I think that idea of looking cool and all that very much enters my consciousness when somebody's around. And I think that, certainly wouldn't have been able to access letting go fully on video. But I think the inner desire was to just go off in a room, put some music on and just start to dance, which is interesting.
You should do it. And the thing is that with my experience, one time I was doing Katsugen and then I started to dance and I started to become aware that I was trying to look cool or whatever. And I tripped and I hurt myself. I mean, nothing serious. But I realized that, it doesn't mix. If you want to dance, you got to dance. And then if you want to do Katsugen, it's a separate thing until you get used to it. And then maybe you can combine the two. But it's very difficult to do in the beginning. I mean, I don't recommend mixing it, just should do one or the other. But the thing is, Katsugen, when you're doing it, other people looking at you when you're doing it might think you're dancing. So, but you're not actually dancing. They're not doing it for their viewing pleasure or to dance with a partner or something. You're just, it's Katsugen and dance. So it's good to have that distinction in your mind about what that, about that. And another thing also, I forgot to mention that with the movement, there is a closing movement. In other words, if you start to have these yawning and you feel this jitter or something, and you shouldn't be doing that, what you do is you clench your your stomach muscle, like right, your tantian. That's the, I don't know if you know about the it's like an inch below your navel. That's called the tantian in Chinese. I forgot the Japanese word for it. That's the second biggest cluster of nerves in your body next to your brain. And that's the center of gravity. And that's where your chi comes from. You focus on that. I learned in martial arts class, the Aikido, about using that chi. And what you do is you kind of clench your stomach around that chi. And you breathe out. And that will take you out of the Katsugen mode. Okay, so basically you should do that at the end of each movement so that, it's actually, sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes you automatically you snap out of it, but sometimes you have to do that to make sure that it's closed and that you're not still, even though after I do that, if that movement is very strong in you, even after you do that, you'll come back and you start doing Katsugen again because you just haven't done it long enough, or it's still excess energy in your body. But otherwise, it's good to do that. Especially,
just
go to work or something,
Oh, okay, you answered my question right there. I was just going to ask you, Richard. I was like, what would be the reason to close it, so to speak? And it's that, right? It's that, hey, we do have places where maybe we can't fully show up that way. And so in order to put a bow on it, that part makes sense. And just to comment a little bit on what you said around dancing, maybe if I might just challenge that notion for a minute, maybe it's a definition of dance, but to me, when I think of dance in its purest form, it's not about the technique or conforming to a specific set of prescribed movements or appearing a particular way, but it's actually just moving with unrestrained joy, and moving.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, that's the beginning part of Katsugen, is tapping into that. But the thing is, with Katsugen, what differentiates it from other free movement methods, which there are a lot of, is that you're actually tapping into and activating the autonomic nervous system so that you are starting to yawn and belch and all that kind of stuff. And that signifies the start of the Katsugen movement. So without that, it's just dancing a free movement. So that's the important part, is to do that and then get beyond that and start to releasing the negative energies, the things that are kind of very deeply kind of nested inside you, and it's subconsciously affecting your health. But
it makes me think about that phrase, dance like nobody's looking, because I just feel like that's been this running theme throughout this episode today, is just this way that dance is that unbridled, how did you say it, Rahul? Like the unmitigated expression of joy, or what was it?
Unrestrained, I think is what I said. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But then when I think about myself in all these different dance situations, like at a wedding, or even going to like an environment where it's more like supposed to be more like that, like in a 5 rhythms dance, or going to ecstatic dance, where there's this more of this idea of like freedom. There's still, I know in my personal experience, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, like you show up, if I'm really honest about what's happening, I'm like, well, I'm letting myself go into that. And then I'm kind of like wondering how I'm looking in relation to all the other people in the room, or is anyone else watching me? And, we just have this, I'll speak personally, but I do think it's a pretty common universal human experience. We are concerned about how we're being perceived by others. And even as I'm here, as we're making this episode, I'm kind of toggling back and forth, feeling like, this is awesome. I'm just going to let myself do this. And then I'm like, oh, we're putting this on YouTube. Like, oh, how am I going to look? Like all this sort of thing. And I think what I'm gaining from this practice is when we give ourselves that opportunity, if we find ways to really dance like no one's looking, to move and transform different patterns and energies, things that are stuck inside us, then the health benefits of that are enormous. The peace, I feel like very lucid right now, on like a mental level, and I'm sure that will transform and dissipate as day goes on or whatever, but the benefits of it are immense. And that need to clench and return to showing up in these different ways is important. But I think a lot of us just turn that clench function on and then never turns off. And we don't have these ways to revitalize ourselves and restore ourselves.
Exactly, because, in those situations like a festival where you dance and move, there's still an expectation that you got to move, all right? With Katsugen, you don't have to move. You can just crawl up on the ground and twitch your finger. The thing is, if you did that in one of those places, people really think you're weird, right? And so even those places have their conventions, they have their rule, which everyone has to follow. With Katsugen, there is none. Even though we call it movement, you don't have to move. It can be stillness. It can be totally still, or it can just be wiggling your head. That's the whole thing, is that we have to put up with all these expectations, right? If we go into a free movement class or dance, we have to do free movement. Well, what if we don't want to? We want to just sit and vegetate. That's the thing about Katsugen, is you can do anything you want. It's not limited to a certain platform or certain, matrix that you have to conform to. And you're just letting this inner energy express itself, the divinity express itself through your body, through these movements.
So if I might just summarize, what I'm picking up here, Richard, is that, hey, like, we as people develop a set of conditioned ways of moving through the world and different sorts of thought patterns and things that keep us confined to a particular way of being. And in certain cases, that's helpful, right? Because we do have to live in this world and interact with the world in a certain way. But on the other hand, it's holding back natural movements or not movements, just ways of being that are authentic to what our body's wisdom, our soul's wisdom wants for us. And so what Katsugen provides is a simple way, a gentle way to connect with those inner desires, those inner movement, or whatever it is that's coming from deep within, and gives us sort of the space or the permission to just allow those things to express themselves. And then that has a calming effect, or a releasing effect, I guess, more than calming, on different aspects of our nervous system, which then has health benefits for us. Is that tracking everything?
Yeah, except the important part too is that it's not just connecting, of course, you said release, and it's actually connecting and releasing that energy so that you're actually manifesting these energies in real life. So you're actually creating the concept of changing the negative into the positive. So once you get rid of all this negative conditioning and you're left with the true core of yourself that's connected to the source, then you're able to release it so that you actually can create things. Because basically creation, humans actually can't create. We can co-create with the divine creator. But as we co-create, we can't actually, the second law of thermodynamics, or is it the first, about things can't be created or destroyed. Okay, we can change forms. So basically humans can do that. We can change forms in a drastic way, but we can't actually create something out of nothing, except with the help of the creator, who was, the omniscient, omnipotent being. And once we kind of tap into that and connect to that source, then we can become part of that and co-create in our lives what we want based on the leadings of that divine source. But to get to that divine source, we have to get rid of all that BS, all that negative conditioning, and realize who we truly are. And I think Katsugen can do that.
So Richard, if I think we're probably coming up on time here and need to wrap up, but if you were wanting to leave one takeaway or piece of advice or a next step for people who are listening to us, what's something that you'd want to communicate to them today in light of everything that we've gotten to do today, everything that's transpired in the last hour and change?
I think that would be to just become aware of that source the creator source within you in whatever ways that's comfortable for you, whether it's through spiritual disciplines, through practices, different modalities, just to experiment and just get to that part of you that is the source of everything, because that's where everything starts. And, and we all have that, just like a plant, put in a darkened room with just like a little crack in the ceiling, the plant will unerringly go towards the light and start growing towards that light. And we all have that. We all have that light within us, and we all have that free will ability to go towards that light. And I think that's all we have to do is seek that light, and eventually you're going to break through the ceiling.
Thanks for that. It's beautiful. Rahul, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up today, or any last thoughts of how you're doing? Hope you're not feeling more shame because,
No, I just want to thank you, Richard, for sharing your time and your wisdom with us here today, and for rolling with all of our tech issues. But no, this has been really nice and informative, and I want to take some of this into my life today, immediately, and see kind of what this looks like. But just want to thank you again for sharing all of this with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, and don't worry about the tech issues, because sometimes that's what life is about, right? It's like like sometimes I think that humans, because of the evolution and how we evolved, we need to have some problems in order to be happy. We need some challenges. Otherwise, we become bored and we start creating our own challenges.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And so if you're listening to this, I hope this has been beneficial to you in some way, and that you're able to, in safe and controlled ways, find a way into practicing this. If you check out Richard at his website, you can find out more. There's a book Richard's written about Katsugen, amongst other books. So if you want to go deeper, you can check him out there. There's some demonstration videos on YouTube as well. And I think just it's beautiful, I think, what Richard shared about finding that source within us, and at least something that I'm thinking about, which I'm wishing for you, if you're listening to this too, is just the breakdown of those conventions that we walk around in life unconsciously perpetuating. And I think I hope that this actually has been an invitation in our show to break down some of the conventions that we have fallen into as we've gone through doing this show now in its third year. And just feeling, I guess I just want to express gratitude for my own feeling in this moment through these movements with Richard, of feeling connected to a source, or having things through tech problems expose fissures in my static standard way of operating, and through those fissures fall down into something that's much more deep and profound. And I'm wishing the same to you as you navigate your own journey in life. And we thank you for joining us and being part of this exploration today and in general with the show. And so thanks so much for listening to us. Again, please share our work with a friend if it resonates with you. Leave us a review. You can sign up and join our newsletter. Follow us along on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And we will catch you next time. Thanks so much, and take care. Have an amazing day.